Okay. First I should mention that this program is being recorded. Welcome to our panel discussion about the key to resilience. Oh, sorry. Okay. We appreciate, sorry. We'll be talking about adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, what they are and how they can be managed. Thank you to everyone for attending. We appreciate you investing your time with us tonight to talk about this public health issue. Some quick notes about operations. We have the chat feature open, so you can contact our host if you have technical trouble. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A feature. After the program, I'll be emailing you a resource page. Now, I'm very honored and excited to introduce our panel. First, we have Robin Schrader, who is the Mental Health Services Coordinator for the St. Mary's County Public Schools. She is a certified clinical social worker with extensive experience working with children, families, and staff within the school system to manage the impact of adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. Next, we have Dr. O.C. Watson-Thompson, professor at Towson University and former chair of the Department of Early Childhood Education. Dr. Watson-Thompson has an extensive career with public schools and higher education, focusing on mentorship, preparation, and professional development of emerging teachers and practitioners. We also have Dr. Jana Thompson, assistant professor in the Department of Educational Studies at St. Mary's College of Maryland. Dr. Thompson has been a lead teacher and teacher liaison within the Baltimore City public school system and has also developed curriculum for teacher professional development during her career in higher education. Next, we have Jennifer Vorhar, who is a licensed certified clinical social worker with a certification in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Jennifer has worked with Child Protective Services, foster care, outpatient mental health, long-term care, and military family services, and now has a private practice counseling service for children and families. We also have Alicia Stack, who is an attorney representing families and children, first through the Southern Maryland Center for Family Advocacy, and currently as a partner with a private firm. Alicia has often represented children, both as a child in need assistance attorney with Maryland Legal Aid and as a best interest attorney appointed by the court. Lastly, we have Jill Hutchison, who is the Youth Services Coordinator for St. Mary's County Libraries and also serves as chairperson for the ECAC, which is the Early Childhood Advisory Council for St. Mary's County. Jill, could you please get us started tonight?
I just wanted to share a little bit about what the ECAC is and what we do. So the Early Childhood Advisory Council is an interagency group that brings together representatives of different organizations and agencies who serve families and children under the age of 6. There's an ECAC in every Maryland county and Baltimore City, and also an overarching one at the state level. Our ECAC members here in St. Mary's include the library, St. Mary's County Public Schools, including the Judy Center and Head Start, the Office of Child Care, Department of Social Services, the Health Department, the NAACP, the Family Daycare Association, Healthy Family Southern Maryland, and the Promise Resource Center, which is our regional child care resource center. The overarching goal of all ECACs is to ensure that all of our children reach the age to attend kindergarten fully ready to learn and thrive. And we move towards that goal with a variety of activities. Currently, all of the Maryland ECACs are in the second year of a 3-year grant from the Maryland State Department of Education. One of those activities.
Okay.
Did I freeze up? Sorry.
Yeah, we lost a little bit of that,
right.
But just at the end.
Okay, so we're in the second year of a 3-year grant from Maryland State Department of Education for activities that move us closer to our goal. And tonight's program is one of those activities supported by the grant. So thank you all for being
here. Okay, now let's start talking about the movie Resilience, which was available to watch over the weekend. It was a documentary about the adverse childhood experiences. So Robin, if you could start, and Jennifer also can tell us about what specifically are we talking about when we say adverse childhood experiences? Oh, you're muted, Robin.
Thanks. So adverse childhood experiences are It actually started as a study between Kaiser, and then the CDC actually tagged on to that study. And it really was trying to look at experiences that adults had when they were children and sort of seeing if there was any relation to poor health outcomes. And so adverse childhood experiences are things like emotional, psychological, physical abuse, sexual abuse, poverty, divorce, someone in your family using substances, domestic violence, someone in your family with significant mental health concerns impairing their ability to parent. It could be criminal activity, or if someone in your family, like a parent, was incarcerated while you were a child. And what they did is they looked at that and they suspected that there was an impact on health outcomes. And they were right. It's one of the largest studies ever conducted. I think it was over 17,000 people that they did these anonymous surveys for and looking at their behaviors. And they found this huge connection between what happens to us as children and experiences that have the potential to be traumatic and how we are in adulthood with our health. And it can impact things like heart disease, cancer, death rates, things like that. So that's kind of what ACEs are in a nutshell. And I think the second part of that question was, okay, so lots of people have those experiences, right, as children. That was actually one of the things that came out in the study, that a lot of people had them. And they found that people who had 4 or more ACEs out of those 10 areas were more likely to have a negative impact on their adulthood life experiences and things. And so one of the big questions is, how do we build resilience to overcome that? And so I want Jen to talk a little bit about that, but I'll add a few things from my perspective. And then hopefully Jen can pop in with more clinical information. But typically some of the things that I work with in the school level on how do we help children in the school environment who either may currently being exposed to some type of event that could be traumatic or stressful, how do we help staff who may have had traumatic experiences when they were children? And how do we help parents build that resiliency? Because maybe they had experiences when they were children, and now that's impacting their ability to parent and how they parent. And so one of the biggest things that we teach is building connections and relationships with kids. Like, that is the number one thing for me, is building trust and prioritizing those relationships and following through and being there. Taking care of yourself, fostering wellness, whether that's your physical health and your mental health. Being aware that you need to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. And I think sometimes as parents or caregivers or staff who are educators, sometimes we often are the type of personality that we want to give, and we often put ourselves last. And sometimes that can be pretty harmful. So we need to build that skill, because by you showing that skill, you can then build that in others and in kids. So I'll throw this over to Jen. I think maybe she can add a few more clinical parts to building resiliency.
Thanks, Robin. So a couple of things that are important when we talk about building resilience and being able to be more than our experience. We know that things happen in our lives. They don't become who we are. They just become a part of the chapter of our life, and we can overcome those things. In the movie, I liked the way that they were talking about the idea of, so many people have this phrase of, well, just suck it up, just move on, just suck it up. And there's so many studies that are coming out now that we know that our body remembers the things that we experience, whether wherever in our body that experience gets stuck, it impacts the way that we engage in our life, engage with the people in our life. And so it's important for us to remember that our body is a system. Our brain is not separate from the rest of our body, and our experiences influence all of that. So when we talk about being resilient, Robin mentioned a few of those. I cannot stress enough the importance of exercise and overall physical wellness. When we hear about kids getting recess taken away as a consequence for poor behavior in school, that takes away an outlet for them to get some of that energy out. So when we experience a traumatic event or something that falls within the ACEs category, it creates energy in our body. And if we don't do something with that energy will do something to us. So telling a child who has experienced one of those ACEs events over the course of their life, maybe even just as they were getting on the bus to come to school, there was something happening in their home. They've got that energy in them, and now it's coming out in the classroom, and we tell them, you have to go sit at your desk and you can't have recess. Looking at opportunities for them to have consequences for inappropriate behavior, but also looking at what's the root of that behavior and what's underneath of it, what's behind it. And as we grow up, we need to and become adults and engage in our worlds. We need to remember the importance of taking care of ourselves. Just like Robin said, the overall physical wellness is vital to this idea of resilience. Building social supports, having people that you can connect to, you can talk to, people that you can call and say, I forgot to grab bread at the grocery store and I've got all 3 kids, getting ready for bed. Can you grab some for me? Having somebody that can be a tangible support, somebody that you can talk to, that you can just kind of unload some of that pressure that we feel. Knowing where we can go for community support when we need not only that professional support from doctors and school programs and things like that, but also having a professional that you can sit down and talk to and be able to problem solve and process things. And also information. Sometimes we don't respond in ways because of a lack of information. So if we have people that we can tap into to get information that helps to inform us to then be able to interact in our world in different ways. Some other ideas for resilience, I'll just name a couple more. Helping those that we interact with, whether they're children or adults, learn to set goals, learn to be able to figure out ways to reach those goals, and understanding that mistakes are part of the process. That's how we learn. That's how we learn to do things differently and learn to do things better, is by making mistakes. So helping people to understand how to set goals, how to reach them, and to how to overcome those mistakes. Mistakes don't change the whole trajectory of things. It just means it's a hurdle that we have to continue to push through. And learning really good coping skills, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, breathing techniques, relaxation, going back to health, sleep. Sleep is so vitally important. And we often say, I'm too busy and we just don't get enough sleep. We're not recharging our bodies. It's physically vital to our well-being to make sure that we're getting enough sleep. We're fueling our bodies, we're feeding our bodies, we're keeping our bodies hydrated. And also having outlets for fun, being able to just turn off the stress of life and be able to have an opportunity to engage in something that's fun and interactive. And through all of those different avenues, we can find ways to make connections with other people through our hobbies and through finding those different kinds of supports.
Oh, those are great ideas. I was wondering, Alicia, as a child advocate, well, first of all, one of the concepts in the movie was toxic stress, saying that the stress becomes unmanageable when you don't have the support. And Jennifer was just talking about where that support can come from. So, Alicia, I was wondering, with your work as a child advocate, what forms of support in one of these child's lives do you think is the most helpful to them?
Well, I think to the extent that they do have a stable, loving home, whatever that looks like, whether that's with their natural born parents, one of their parents, maybe a grandparent or other family member, whoever that is, that family doing well is going to really impact their overall health and well-being. That can help them get through a lot of things that might be otherwise difficult. So I think a lot of the supports that support families support children. So whether that's mental health resources for parents that are accessible for them that have either childcare so that they can actually attend or are able to come to the home, transportation that can get to families' places, things that are conveniently located to where people live. All of those things can make a big difference for kids. Like, it's wonderful to have therapy, and there are definitely kids who need that. But just having stability and having the things that their parents need available to those parents can be huge for them.
Thank you. The survey that I had sent out that people could give us some feedback on what they wanted to talk about showed that there was a lot of interest in the role of education. So OC and Jana, I was wondering if you could tell us from your point of view, what is reasonable to expect teachers to do about ACEs in their classrooms, and how the teachers can be supported in this role?
Okay, so, as early childhood educators, we always start with understanding the developmental milestones of early childhood education. We discuss Erik Erikson's theory of positive outcome versus adverse outcomes, and the impact of all experiences and interactions have on young children. I mean, we talk about the hierarchy of needs when it gets into Abraham Maslow and the need for a village when it comes to Urie Bronfenbrenner's work. So, we give them that foundation of understanding what is typically needed for all children to thrive. So when you start thinking about resiliency, we almost take it for granted that children are naturally resilient. And we know that that's not always the case. In most instances, it's not the case that how we shape the environment and the experiences that we provide for children is what fosters resiliency. So when you think about teachers and what we do in teacher education, we try to give them a foundation for understanding when children are developing or displaying behaviors or having difficulty academically or making friends and socializing. We try to identify why those atypical experiences are occurring in our classrooms. And I will say that while we look at typical and atypical experiences of young children, really only in the last number of years have we really gotten into the research on the impact of a lot of the childhood experiences and how they play into the teaching learning processes. And so we are discussing it more in education. We are providing experiences. We make it a part of our topics throughout the programs. And I also know that we have a variety of experiences in different communities for them to engage. And we also need to realize that adverse childhood experiences are not delegated to one community or not. It's across all socioeconomic levels. It's across all races and ethnicities, because sometimes it's automatically identified as a outgrowth of poverty, while we know poverty can lead to adverse because of all of the dynamics of poverty. And look at COVID. We may have some children who, when they come back to us live and in person, who may have some experiences that we will have to address. So what you can expect from educators, I believe, is that they're willing to learn. And I think what we have to expect from the powers that be, that we are going to have to continue to have professional development on identifying, signs of ACE, but not jumping and quickly to say this child is, because that child may not be. So let's not label children so quickly. But I do believe that professional development is going to be critical, that we continue to have professional development throughout teaching experiences from experts like some of our panelists on, signs of children that are going through difficulty, that have experienced trauma, or who may have had adverse experiences. And we need to have more specialists in schools, not when you call on them when things are out of hand. So I think working in tandem with teachers, you need to have counselors, you need to have school psychologists and even psychiatrists if needed, social workers or needed, because sometimes it stems from things that are needed in their home life. We need parent educators. Family educators are going to be critical to helping families know how to parent and working with teachers. And finally, if you say what we can expect, I think this new generation of students know how to access resources, and we have to make sure those resources are available. But if I had a magic wand, the resources would be down the hall, or at least share it with one other school, that you don't have to wait 6 weeks and to come in and to give some suggestions, not pull children out or isolate them, but suggestions on how to meet their needs. And I always talk about things that we could do as teachers to meet their needs. We talk about universal design for learning, where children have multiple ways to show what they know, and we teach in multiple ways. And I don't know if we're going to come back to this, but I think having more play-based in classrooms where teachers can observe children. And I think discussions with children and taking time out, I know it's too much, but I've always said, I think that every teacher should make it their duty to have a conversation at least once a day with every child. I mean, with 20 children, that may be hard. Some can be formal and some can be informal. But I think young children will tell you everything if you make them feel comfortable and safe. They will tell you what's going on in their lives. And then having that very strong relationship with the families, where families will open up and share, because many times as teachers, we don't know what's happening in their home lives. I never taught very, very young children, but I supervised very young children, educators teaching young children. But even my third graders would come in and tell me things that had happened over the weekend if I gave them a chance. So I think once they open that up, then having the relationship with families, even prior to the child open up, will prepare you for what you can say. And since you guys are coming from the library, I think children's literature, quality children's literature that you can read on a regular basis with children, where they can identify and then express themselves. And since Jana is an arts person, I know she probably wants to talk about using the arts for role play and creative dramatics and dance and theater. I think all of those are things we can do in the classroom as we integrate all of the arts into our teaching and learning in UDL. So I don't want to stop.
Oh, that's a good point. The Miss Kendra curriculum I thought was very interesting, like using the dramatic play. Jana, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so my research is arts integration and using arts integration to teach content areas, but also using arts integration as a tool for behavior modification and looking at, a kindergartner is not going to necessarily tell you I'm having a hard time at home all the time, but they will draw a picture of a monster and looking at that monster and asking them like, why did you draw this? And I have a rule, you never ask a kid, you never assume what a kid draws, because if you get it wrong, you decided you may have put a wound on the child. They were like, that's my dad. So, but you have the opportunity to tell you, why did you draw this? Why are you, or even like, same thing as, this is my mom. So same thing as my mom, having those stations where kids can play, you learn so much about their home life. I remember watching at a camp, a kid play with a doll. And I was just like floored of how they were playing with this little doll. And, I went over and I said, why are you holding the doll that way? And it wasn't something really bad. It's just that they got a new little sister and they weren't feeling it. They just were not feeling having a new little sister every day. They wanted to be the only. So simple things like that. Again, I take this from the video that I thought was a really good quote. One of the gentlemen in the video said, we're not making excuses for them. We need to deal with it. So it's one of those things of, you're not taking away and saying, oh, they can't do the work, they're not going to be able to be educated right now. It's no, okay, let's deal with the problems that are happening on top of educating them and giving them a resource to explore and to explain. And I think my mom just said this, like, I'm really worried about COVID, because the things that would happen in a normal kindergarten classroom where you learn how to play together and you learn how to socialize are not happening. And if you don't have those parents that are making a conscious effort to give you those things, I feel like we're going to see some things that we have never seen before. I do work in the schools and do student teaching. So I'm a college supervisor, and some of my students are teaching in the kindergarten classroom. And they told me they are not allowed to touch each other. They're not allowed to play together for COVID. They literally they can't play with toys in the classroom. They have to just walk around in a circle outside for recess. They just walk in circles, or they sit on the ground and just talk to each other. And I mean, it's something, but it's also like, that's what kindergarten was built for. If you look at the history of kindergarten, it's about playing and socialization and learning those tools that we need as adults, as coping mechanisms, and learning how to share, how to be a friend. And so I'm just a little worried about that, because those are the things that naturally just come in kindergarten. And I feel like some of the things that they discuss in that video it's gonna be worse. It's gonna be way worse.
I want to add just a little bit to that. I think, obviously I'm in K through 12 education. And one of the biggest barriers that I've seen over many years in different jurisdictions, so it's not just here, it's in all school systems, is that I think the biggest barriers for educators is fear. I feel like teachers feel they don't have the skill. They're not therapists, they're not counselors, and that is very true. However, you don't have to have a therapy background to work with a student who's experiencing trauma in the classroom. And I think it's about perspective. And I think this was in the video. I get some of them confused sometimes, but there's this idea in trauma work that says, instead of saying what's wrong with you in response to behavior, saying what happened to you. And it's the judgment that sometimes happens about behavior is where we need to stop. And it's hard. It is hard in education to be exposed to behavior that is disruptive and difficult, and to not be frustrated by it. It's normal to be frustrated by it, but we have to take a step back and understand that not everybody has had the same experiences we've had. And sometimes there's a disconnect. Sometimes there's not, but sometimes there's a disconnect between those teaching and those learning and where we came from. And we can't always have our own personal lens on when working with people, because everybody's different. And if you treat the situation as if everybody could have been exposed to trauma, you're likely to have a much better outcome with all students, and you're going to impact those students that have had some difficulty or continuing to have difficulty.
We actually have a related question, kind of on the other end. It says, what can a passerby do or say when they see a young child being traumatized or exposed to a lot of stress? No one wants to judge another person or parent, but I always feel guilty or ashamed when I see something and feel helpless. So this is a real world example. And what do you do?
For me, I think that it is very hard, because obviously that's a very broad question and could mean a lot of different things. In general, like one of the things that I've done this before, it is very hard. Like if you see somebody in a store and you feel like there's a situation and it makes you uncomfortable, oftentimes I just ask the parent, can I help you with something? Can I do something to help? And sometimes that just breaks the tension. Sometimes you might, let's be honest, you might get thrown some words, and that's okay. But I think offering to support instead of judging and accusing and making it a big thing has a better outcome in the end for most situations.
I've experienced that same exact thing that you mentioned, Robin, not only as a mother with young children, but as myself being in the grocery store, and you see a mom that's juggling a kiddo and one's trying to run, and it's a stressful situation. Just say, can I grab that for you? Do you mind? Do you want me to help you pick that up? Just making a connection with somebody. I can easily say to a mom that looks frazzled when she's in the grocery store, I've been there, I've done that. It does get better. I promise, they do grow up. And just making a connection with somebody, and you can see the weight just go, because they know that they're not alone. I mean, granted, we're going to go in separate directions when we leave the grocery store, but just making a connection with somebody. We oftentimes discredit what just a few kind words can do for someone. And so if you do see something, you know, obviously if it is if you're a mandated reporter and it's a situation that requires you to call and make a report, obviously you want to make sure you're falling within those guidelines. But sometimes it's just as simple as asking if you can help, or having a conversation, being available to that family, that child, that person that might need some help, and being a resource, being a part of that social support that they may not have, and helping to grow that social support for them.
I want to throw another angle too. I mean, yes, you want to diffuse and maybe break it up as well, but I also we need to sometimes think about, are we, and I think Robin mentioned this a little bit, are we judging the parenting according to how we parent? Because the different cultural groups parent in different ways. So while I may think it's a little rough, it may not be rough in that situation for that group. I mean, if I think about the difference between how I parent my kids and how my mom and dad parented us, it's totally different, you know, when you think about generationally. Even though my mother never wanted me to even raise my voice with her darling grandkids, she would tell me, sit over there right now, and I want it with some nice little choice words, and my being the baby of the family, I was parented totally different, and the only girl of 6 than my 5 older brothers. They were, spanked and all of these things. So I think we have to be mindful when we're looking at a situation that we're not looking through our limited lens of the situation. I can remember, and Jana might remember this, where my son would walk off. And we had just moved to Maryland, and I was so nervous because I didn't find him. And I was just like, where is he? And we were looking for him. And he would just walk off and see a toy, and start playing or talking to someone. And I just found him, and my heart was beating so fast. And I was like, where have you been? Where have you? And someone said, no, mother, don't talk to him like that. With an accent. And I gave her that look like, if you don't leave me alone, because I had just, thought I had lost my baby, So I think we have to not be so quick to judge. Even as teachers, I tell my students, be careful how you bring your middle class and predominantly white female background into different situations, because that the changing demographics of schools will dictate that we sometimes think it's not about me, it really is about the children we service, so that we look at who they are rather than I'm trying to get them to assimilate to me, but that we do more of the changing and the switching and the learning and the growing. And I'm not saying change your values, but that we really think about, I read this article and they talked about trauma sensitive schools, and they kind of mentioned it a little bit in the tape. And, that is creating an environment that's maintained, that's receptive to every child and their needs, and making them feel safe that if there are issues, they're willing to share, and being consistent. And that's where that family educator comes into play. But I think when you see a family having difficulty, if you can diffuse it with a smile or a laugh, and I will talk
talking to the child.
And I was going to say many times I'll talk to the child like, "What's up, dude? You having a bad day? And something, or come here, Or I will say to the mom, "Do you want me to get something off the shelf for you?" And I've done that, and make a joke of it and keep it lighthearted. And, and even when I'm thinking, oh, that's just going to make the matter worse, I just swallow my, that's going to make the matter worse, and say, can I help you? As Jennifer said, can I help you? Can I get something off the shelf? Or, whatever I can do to help, because parenting is really, really difficult, and if you have more than, one can be a lot too. But, parenting is just difficult. And so we need to remember that we weren't always perfect as parents either. So, and that's what I think about.
And it's also checking your implicit biases. And I do credit St. Mary's College of Maryland with, they make all of their MAT students, their master's students, they all have to take a class in implicit bias. And they're constantly checking themselves. I teach a part of the class and I make them keep a notebook. And every time they go into a classroom, they have to write down every time they say something negative to a child, and they have to counterbalance that. By the end of the day, they have to say something positive. And that child constantly has to get those reinforcements, because sometimes we don't know we're doing it. We're just like, little Johnny, I know he's bad, right? And we just immediately, somebody could be talking and Johnny, and it may not even be Johnny, but now you've set up in this kid's head that he's the bad kid in class. So guess what I'm gonna do as little Johnny? I'm gonna be bad all day, because I get more attention from, especially if I'm coming from a situation where my parents yell at me all the time. You yelling me at as a teacher is just fostering that same narrative to me. So by third grade, guess what I am? I'm the bad kid in class, because I get more attention that way. And I may have a whole bunch of wounds that have happened at home that are now trickled in the classroom that I've never dealt with. And then I used to teach high school too. And guess what? When it gets to high school, it's a whole nother problem, a whole nother situation that probably could have been solved back in pre-K kindergarten, but it just escalated.
And kids are so much more than just their behavior, and you talk about the lens through which we need to look, OC, and it's a perfect example. I mean, we are interacting with young children who are being parented by adults who had ACEs experiences, who probably were raised by parents who had, so we don't know what all that stuff is back here. They come to school and we see what we see, and we have to interact with the children, knowing that they are interacting with generations of parents and grandparents who have had these same experiences, and then are parenting them based on that experience.
That's right.
And sometimes the perception of the way you see behavior too. So like, it's sometimes just reframing that same behavior and looking at it like the student who is rebellious. Well, they also could be described as independent. I mean, there's different ways. There's this really great chart out there that talks about like all these different labels that we label behavior. It's all negative. And then on the other side is the opposing positive twist. And I really love that chart to show people, because our brains are wired to go negative. That's just how they work. And if you can purposely reframe how you think about behavior, I think it does a lot of value in the school system. And you talked about like that trauma sensitive schools, and SMCPS is working towards that. We were starting that process before COVID, and we were starting to do some really great trainings in the schools with staff and helping bring awareness and some easy strategies to help with that. Because, going back to ACEs and what Jen was just talking about with like, you never know what that parent has had to deal with in their childhood, or that grandparent. Trauma gets in your DNA. Like Jen said in the beginning, the body remembers. Trauma can be generational. So things that happened 50 years ago can be still embedded in your DNA, and it can influence your brain and your body and how you respond to events in life. And so this is such a huge, impactful area that I think that's why it's starting to gain ground, not just in like the therapeutic world, but in education and in the medical community and doctors' offices and things like that, because it impacts every facet of life. And the more we can bring awareness to that and understanding of what we've been through, even as adults, that helps change how we can interact with young people as well, and each other.
Do you see positive gains in the breaking that intergenerational effect cycle?
Absolutely. And I think the big thing to remember is that you're not defined by your trauma. And you're not destined to have a certain outcome because you've been exposed to certain events. Doesn't mean that your life has to take that negative turn. That is why resilience is so important. That's why building those skills to give someone to overcome. It doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean the events didn't happen. And it absolutely is going to shape you and how you do things. But you can learn skills to make a difference and shift that DNA and shift those the brain and the body. Remember, you can shift that. And it works. And there's lots of things that works. So there's the basic stuff, and then recognizing when you do need a higher level of care. I think that is important. There are many things that we can do day to day, but it is important to recognize when your child or when you as a parent or you as a staff member are struggling. When something is triggering you, if you're a teacher and that kid's behavior is triggering you every single day, I'd want to know, what is it about that kid's behavior that's triggering you and why? Why is it triggering you? Is it something that you grew up with and it's helping you remember something and that's giving you, you're feeling some kind of way because of it? It's important to recognize that. And if it's interfering with your life function, or even if it's not quite that bad, you might want to seek some additional support, whether that is professional support or social support. It's very important to address it and work through some of those things.
There was some interest in the community, like how the community can get involved outside of the schools and, seeking, counseling for yourself. Like, what else is there out in the community that people might be able to get involved, and what's in place right now?
The first thing that comes to my mind is there is a community committee that is through in collaboration with the health department, and it's called the Partnership for St. Mary's. The group is called the Violence, Injury, and Trauma. And that is made up of community members and community agencies. And the focus is looking at that. And part of that is about trauma and ACEs and what can we as a community, what do we have? Because we do have resources in our community to support that. And where are the gaps and where do we need to go from there? How do we improve upon and build upon what we already have? We have a lot of strengths in this community and they go way back. We just need to build upon them and bring awareness to what we have as well. So that's just one thing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yes.
I think also this program is a good stepping point in terms of helping the community become aware of their own biases, become aware of their own lenses through which they're looking at the world, beginning to remove the stigma about receiving help and support, not just mental health services, but there's some families that don't want to go to medical doctors because of judgments they've experienced or things that people have said. They don't want to ask for help at the school because they're going to say this about me or they're going to think this about me. Sometimes the face that we have, that look we have on our face, the words that we use, it passes judgment even though we don't intend it to be. So having self-awareness when you're interacting with people in the community, there are so many people in our community that touch other folks, postal workers, grocery store clerks, gas station attendants. There's so many people beyond educators, medical professionals, and social workers, the mental health field that are touching folks every day. And they have an incredible influence and an ability to be able to reduce the stigma so that somebody can simply say, I need help. Even if they don't know what that help is, they have the ability and the strength because they have the support around them to be able to say, I need help.
Okay. And I was thinking, as far as the community goes and people watching who are interested in getting involved, we can each work within our own sphere of influence. If you're in a faith-based group or some sort of youth group, you can look at it a different way and, maybe get the word out or start something new if you see the need.
And there's lots of great resources that people can get information from. There's a place called ACEs Connections that sends you daily emails and it gives you lots of good information. And like you said, you can work within your sphere And so let's just say you work at Food Lion and you're in customer service, right? And you're working with people. Sometimes just having some of that information about what people are experiencing is enough to change. How many times have we gone to the grocery store and thought, "Oh, that person's having a bad day," and some people respond back to that in a negative way, and some people have grace with other people, and so the Child Traumatic Stress Network is another one that's really good about ACEs. Um, and there's a lot of the CDC has some stuff about ACEs. There's reliable sources for what it is and what we can do to help support other people. Absolutely, communities should be doing that.
I think there are big scale and small scale things too to look at. I mean, the personal is political. You can advocate to your government for more local transportation so that families can get to places they need to go. You can advocate, there's a push in St. Mary's County to build a community center or YMCA, maybe one part, maybe several parts of the county. Those are, community places that can be really beneficial for children, but there are also small scale steps. Maybe there is a, child in your child's class who can't do that same sport because their parents can't take them. Maybe you can. Maybe you can offer to be a support for that family. I'm happy to take them to and from Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. Reach out to another family and be a personal support. It's small scale and large scale. You can do those things too.
Yeah, those are great points. Can each, do what's within our ability to do, and then together the whole job gets done. I'd like to circle back to education because we had one question come in with the survey that asked, should we screen for ACEs in schools, or would it be better to do universal strategies that just benefit all children?
I'd say not. Why not both? We should be teaching universal strategies for all children, of course, but there does need to be more push to, I love the part in the video where the teacher is like teaching the list on the wall of what to say and what to look for. We don't let people touch us in our private parts. We don't let people hit us. We don't let people yell at, like, advocating for themselves, like teaching kids to be advocates for themselves and knowing that those things are not appropriate, because my mom says this, actually, I got that from her, environmental insanity, where they have been amongst this insanity for so long that they think it's normal. So they're like, they don't even know that it's crazy that they should not be getting yelled at, and that doesn't mean love. And so teaching kids early on that these things are not appropriate, like someone touching you inappropriate is not a sign of love. But if no one ever tells you that, you think that touch feels good because, they must love me if they touch me like that, right? And then by the time you get to middle school, I've seen this in my kids, and I worked in New York, Baltimore, and DC, and like I've seen some of the worst situations. And a lot of times we don't know about it until it's later on. And even in St. Mary's County, I'm going to be honest, some of the things, I work a summer camp in the summer, and I'm just like, some of the things they tell me, I'm like, in middle school and high school, you should not know this or experience this. And typically it's all the way back to when they were in elementary school. So teaching those things early on, that's the ACEs training that you need. You need that kind of ally in there doing the work, but you also need to know that every child, you need to adapt for every, that's why we have universal design, because not every child is the same. And like I tell my students, you get what you get. You don't have control over who the parent is. You get what you get, but you need to help that. Your job is to help that child. When your door shuts, you have mandates, yes. You write down your everything that's on that lesson plan. You do the most prettiest MSD qualified lesson plan. But when that door shuts, you do what you need to do for your kids to be successful. So.
Yeah, and I sort of have mixed feelings about like providing the ACEs survey to all students as a universal screen. First, I want to say that the ACEs survey was originally designed to be given to adults about their childhood experiences, and that's an important piece to note. The other part of it is that I do feel in, at least in that K through 12 education, we can provide tools and strategies to manage. And you may not need to know that that student had a specific trauma, and the response is the same. If you're taught how to respond as if every student had a trauma, there's a mixed feeling. I have done that, and not here in St. Mary's, and in a previous location, I have given that in a very specific situation where I felt like there was a big disconnect between the staff and the student population, and I felt like there was some big disconnect. And I had a theory about that, I feel like that overall they're just not connecting. They're not understanding where our kids are coming from, this particular one specific location school. And we ended up doing that. And what we found was that the majority of staff in that location had an ACE score of less than 3, 70% of staff. And then we had 70+% of students had an ACE score of 4 or more in that specific school. And so in that one specific situation, it was a very valuable tool to help with teacher buy-in as to why they needed to know the information. But I find that most educators want to learn how to help their kids.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very unique situation. And I do feel that in time, we're going to get there. We always want to improve. We have programming and we have some training, and we want to build on that. And I think we will continue to do that. I know that we are committed to that. I think our community is committed to that. We have these school-based health centers coming up that just are popping up here. And we have one opening at Margaret Brent Middle School and one opening at Spring Ridge Middle School. And I think those are big starters to that community school connection where we are one. We're not higher ed, community-based services, school, parent, staff. We are one community. And when we start functioning that way, I think we're going to have bigger results and better results in the long term.
We go back and talk about whether or not I think it should be a screening. I think we need to first realize that trauma is not the event. So really, trauma is rather, and I wrote the response to the event, and every child responds in a different way, even within a family. You could have 2 children raised in the same situation, and how they respond is different, how they cope and their ability to be resilient. And, as one child would say, this made me stronger. Another child said, this took away everything that I ever wanted, so as teachers, you're right. We want to meet the needs of our students. And I think one of the things that I always talk about is, and I think I've said it about, are we looking through our own lens? I also think as teachers, sometimes we forget developmentally appropriate behaviors. And we sometimes forget that children are children, and we forget about what they could do that empowers them, whether we look at what we do that empowers us. So if we begin to look at childhood and say, this way of acting out is very appropriate for a 3-year-old. This is very appropriate for a 4-year-old. And I tell my interns, especially, I said, before you write a lesson plan, you need to go back and look at that section on developmental milestones, on abilities, and say, is this appropriate? And the same thing is true of behaviors. So, the screening, yes, I think is good for teachers to be aware of those different signs. But I'm always afraid that some teacher will go back like in the 70s when they would automatically think children needed special services because of and you had very bright children being placed in special education because of maybe behavioral difficulty that may be related to a trauma, but they're very bright, but they're placed in a self-contained special ed classroom. So I don't want someone without training to be checking off on a screening and said, oh, this child exhibit, well, that may be on this day. Are you actually looking over a period of time? Did you look at the stimulus for that behavior? What occurred in this classroom or out on the playground or
before they got there,
on the bus that create it, and if you see some consistent patterns, then reach out to people who are that part of your team, those counselors, say, these are some of the things, and start to document, and you can even ask permission from the family to videotape. And we're not talking about just acting out, it could be how they socialize with other children, or being independent and having executive functioning behaviors where they can do what they need to do, making good choices, or as opposed to negative choices, or even attending doing instruction, so I think you can start to gather the data, but I don't think, I'm just so afraid that a certain population of children will always come up short on those screenings. And then we're back to the start. I also want to make sure our interns are aware of the new law 20 that was adopted in 2017, which is trauma-informed care for children and families. Because I am an advocate for early intervention, and I know early intervention works. As you said, Robin, you said nothing is permanent. Especially we can rewrite those schemes, in early childhood, the sensitive critical period, those schematas, actions are not permanent usually, and the brain is malleable. So if you have well-informed teachers who see signs or need help, they can reach out and get those services from the experts for early intervention. But let's just not quickly start checking off on a screening tool.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%, because like you mentioned it, and it's so important to note that the things that are on ACEs, the events that make up the ACEs, and you can see those questions online. You can look up the original ACEs study and you can see those questions, what they are. I gave you the basics in the beginning. But it doesn't mean that you're going to have a traumatic response from that. Like you said, you can have two children in the same, let's just use a house fire as an example. That's a pretty traumatic event for a family, right? You can have two kids in the same house fire. One has lifelong impact and one doesn't. Yet they were in the same place at the same time, experiencing the same situation, but their individual makeup and their individual strengths and weaknesses sort of created a different path for themselves. And so it is important that we don't have bias towards certain groups based on certain things that pop up just because you've been exposed to stuff. We know, for example, we have a lot more African American men who are in jail, right? That is unfortunate. And we know that there's a lot of bias around that as to how that happens. That prison to pipeline is a real thing. And so are we going to have judgment about a family because that is happening to them? And I worry about the same things, that we are going to have judgment on groups of people that may have exposure, poverty, that impacts a lot of different people. And are we going to say just because you're in poverty that you are going to have adverse childhood experiences and you're going to have traumatic events happen and you're going to have traumatic experiences and you're going to have more heart disease and things like that? Maybe, but maybe not. And I like to take things as individual as much as possible. At the same time, prevent by providing universal tools that work for everybody and being aware.
Yeah, we did have a question about the ACEs test, but I think that you just covered it. We had one other question that said, as Robin said, history does not have to be our future. What about specific ways to build resilience amongst children and families? We had spoken like in general, how to build resilience, and we're getting near the end of our time. I guess we could put a thought out on a specific idea about resilience.
I mean, as a teacher, I would say I actually teach a class on resilience, the freshman seminar class, and the class is called The Art of Resilience. And the whole the whole thing is I have the students that they are part of a scholarship program where somewhere in there they marked other, right? They're just not the stereotypical white, middle-class student. There's something else there. And my class looks like a rainbow coalition. It's the most beautiful class you will ever see because it's all kinds of kids in this class from all different backgrounds. But the one thing that we start with is I tell them to write their narrative. Write me a story about your life. Just write me a narrative. And I want you to write it from the perspective of you have overcome some goals. What have you overcome since day one to now? Because you're in college for a reason, right? And then as we go out through the semester, they change the story to fit how they're overcoming throughout the whole semester. And it's being a reflective on their own life, right? And a lot of them have imposter syndrome because they don't feel like they should be in school. So it's like checking that self-care all the time and talking about being positive, just saying, and in the school building, every day I would just say hi to kids all the time. And they were like, you're one of the few people that say hi to me. Like simple hi, how are you doing today? Changes a kid's mind. So setting up that resilience of changing the negative into a positive. There's this great TED Talk by Rita Pearson that she says, the student got a -2, but the student got a -18 and she put a +2. And she was like, but didn't I fail? He was like, yeah, but you got a +2. You're not all bad. And when we study again, won't you do better? Mm-hmm. And the kid was like, yeah, I'll do better. And it's such a great TED Talk because it shows like you fostering those kind of mindsets in their head already, saying, you're not bad. You can get over this. You can always do better. So
What was her name? Rita
Pearson.
Pearson, thank you.
It's called Every Child Needs a Champion.
Yeah, it's a great.
I know she passed away.
And
If
for,
I could
for
just
family, I was going to say, Jen, maybe you were going to address that. I was just going to say for families, the question came up about what they can do. I think one thing as parents, in addition to the things that Jen talked about in the beginning, all those wellness things, listen to your kids. And when I say listen, I mean hear them and do your best to hold off on some of that wall that we can put up, because it's okay if you have faults as a parent. It's okay that you admit that to your kid or to your student, and just try to build that relationship with them. And if you say you're going to do something, do your best to do it with them and be there. And so that's one thing. I know Jen wanted to say some things too.
I just want to highlight the importance of social supports. When I was working at the Department of Social Services, we did when we worked with teenagers who were processing, that independent living skills and what do I do when I age out of foster care, we would say, who are your supports? And time again, we would have kids that would say, I don't know. And the question was, and I don't remember who it was. I wish I knew who it was so I could give them credit for it. But they said, if you won an award at the White House and you could invite anybody you wanted to invite, who are you going to call to go to the White House with you and watch you get that award? And like that, the kids were naming off their coach, their teacher, the neighbor, the bus driver. That's the support. If that's who the child is going to call, that's who is their support. And I think about that from a family perspective. Dad's working, mom just got called in to stay late, kids need to get picked up. Who do you call? That's your social support. You literally cannot leave the house, like the example I used. You ran out of something and you need it. I have a sick kid at home and I need a prescription picked up. Who are you going to call? The neighbor, your sister, your mother, the person, 2 doors down that said, if you ever need anything, let me know. People don't just say, call me if you need something, if they don't really mean, call me if you need something. So just creating those social networks. And one really great way to do that is to think about all of the different connections that you have: school, church, work, sporting events, and who are the people within all of those bubbles? Who are those people that you come in contact that you can rely on to be able to say, again, I need help and I need support, and creating that structure of support around families.
Oh, that's great. I think that's a great note to leave on, and we're just at the end of our time. So thanks to all of you for being part of our panel and everybody who's watching tonight. for, giving up some of your time to, come and listen about this important issue. And I hope that this is throwing the rock in the pond and it sends out a lot of great ripples. So thank you all very much for being here. And good night, everyone who's watching.